The 1970s didn't just give us Coppola and Spielberg blockbusters everyone pretends to have watched. Buried beneath the mainstream masterpieces lies a graveyard of cinematic brilliance that got crushed by studio politics, bizarre distribution deals, and audiences who simply weren't ready. These 10 films rewrote the rules of storytelling, pushed boundaries until they snapped, and somehow still remain invisible to most film lovers today. Ready to discover what you've been missing? Number 10. The Conversation, 1974. Francis Ford Coppola made this paranoid surveillance thriller between the two Godfather films, and somehow it became the forgotten middle child of his career. The film follows Harry Call, a professional wiretapper played with devastating quietness by Gene Hackman, who accidentally records evidence of a potential murder and spirals into moral chaos. What makes this movie criminally underrated is how it predicted our modern surveillance nightmare decades before smartphones and government spying became dinner-table conversation. Coppola wrote the script in the late 60s, inspired by Antonioni's blow-up, but the Watergate scandal exploded right as the film released, making it feel ripped from tomorrow's headlines. Critics went absolutely wild, with Pauline Kael calling it a masterpiece of paranoia, and it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, beating out films that are now considered legends. Yet it grossed only $5 million, drowning in the shadow of The Godfather Part II, which released the same year. The final scene, where Harry tears apart his entire apartment, searching for a bug that may not even exist, stands as one of cinema's most haunting metaphors for self-destruction and the price of privacy. Coppola himself has said this was his most personal film, more than any mob saga, because it explored the loneliness of someone who listens to everyone but connects with no one. The sound design alone revolutionized how films use audio as psychological weaponry, with Walter Murch creating layers of distortion that make you question what you're actually hearing. This isn't just a forgotten thriller, it's the blueprint for every paranoid conspiracy film that followed, from Enemy of the State to The Lives of Others. Number 9. The King of Marvin Gardens, 1972. Bob Rafelson directed this slow-burning character study starring Jack Nicholson and Bruce Dern as brothers trapped in a Atlantic City fever dream of failed schemes and broken promises. Nicholson plays David, a late-night radio philosopher who gets dragged into his brother Jason's delusional plan to buy a Hawaiian island. A con so ridiculous it could only exist in the desperate mind of a man running from reality. What makes this film a hidden gem is its refusal to be entertaining in any conventional sense. It's deliberately uncomfortable, suffocating, and painted in the washed-out colors of decay and disappointment. Rafelson shot the entire film on location during Atlantic City's most depressing era, when the boardwalk was rotting and the casinos hadn't yet arrived to inject life into the corpse. Critics were divided and brutal, with Roger Ebert calling it fascinating but emotionally cold, while audiences stayed away in droves, expecting the rebellious Nicholson from Easy Rider and Five Easy Pieces. The film made less than $1 million and disappeared so completely that even Nicholson fans haven't seen it. But what Rafelson captured was something rare: the death of the American dream in real time, told through two brothers who can't escape each other or themselves. Ellen Burstyn delivers one of her most underrated performances as Sally, the woman caught between these toxic men, and her final scene is a gut punch of tragedy. The entire movie feels like a bad trip through a Monopoly game where everyone loses. Cinematographer Laszlo Kovacs used natural light and handheld cameras to create a documentary realism that makes every frame feel stolen rather than staged. This is the kind of film that gets better and more painful with every viewing, revealing layers of dysfunction that most movies are too scared to explore. Number 8. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, 1974. Sam Peckinpah made this grimy Mexican revenge odyssey during his most self-destructive period, and critics absolutely savaged it, calling it unwatchable garbage made by a director drowning in booze and nihilism. Warren Oates plays Benny, a burnt-out bar piano player hired to find the severed head of a man who impregnated a powerful crime lord's daughter, and the journey becomes a descent into hell paved with sweat, flies, and moral rot. Peckinpah himself called this his most personal film, admitting that Benny's alcoholic rage and refusal to compromise mirrored his own battles with Hollywood studios who kept butchering his vision. The film bombed spectacularly, making less than $400,000 against its $1.5 million budget, and Peckinpah's career never fully recovered from the critical beating. But modern audiences have rediscovered it as a masterpiece of existential violence, with directors like Quentin Tarantino worshiping its raw, unapologetic brutality. Roger Ebert originally gave it 1 star, then decades later admitted he completely missed the point and called it a misunderstood classic. The image of Oates driving through the desert with a rotting head in a bag, talking to it like a companion, remains one of cinema's most disturbing and oddly tender portrayals of grief and obsession. Peckinpah shot most of it in Mexico with a skeleton crew, often drunk, fighting with producers while the oppressive heat turned the set into a war zone. The violence isn't stylized like his earlier westerns. It's ugly, pointless, and devastating, stripping away any romanticism about revenge. This is what happens when a genius stops caring about commercial success and makes art as a final middle finger to everyone who doubted him. The film's reputation has grown so much that Criterion finally released it, validating what cult fans knew for decades. Number 7. The Wicker Man, 1973. This British folk horror masterpiece got butchered by studio executives who had absolutely no idea what to do with a movie about pagan rituals and human sacrifice disguised as a mystery thriller. Christopher Lee plays Lord Summerisle with sinister charm, while Edward Woodward's devout Christian police sergeant investigates a missing child on a Scottish island where ancient religions never died. The original cut was 100 minutes of mounting dread, but British Lion Films panicked, hacked it down to 87 minutes, and dumped it as the bottom half of a double feature with Don't Look Now, guaranteeing nobody would take it seriously. Lee called it his best performance and worked for free because he believed in the material that much, yet the studio treated it like disposable trash. Critics who actually saw the full version were stunned, calling it one of the most intelligent horror films ever made, but most audiences never got the chance because prints were literally buried in landfill when the studio changed ownership. The ending remains one of cinema's most shocking and inevitable conclusions. A sacrifice so perfectly constructed that you see it coming and still can't believe it happens. Robin Hardy directed with an anthropologist's eye for detail, creating a community that feels genuinely rooted in pre-Christian belief rather than Hollywood's idea of devil worship. The folk songs performed throughout aren't spooky background music. They're authentic rituals that make the horror feel cultural rather than supernatural. Decades later, endless attempts to find the original negative turned into legend, with film historians treating it like archaeology. When a longer cut finally surfaced, it proved the original was even more disturbing and intelligent than memory suggested. Nicolas Cage's ridiculous remake proved how impossible it is to recapture lightning in a bottle, making the original even more precious. Number 6. McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 1971. Robert Altman took the Western genre, drowned it in rain and mud, and created something so bleak and beautiful that audiences stayed far away because nobody wants a cowboy movie where the hero freezes to death alone. Warren Beatty plays John McCabe, a gambler who stumbles into a frontier town and builds a brothel empire with the help of Mrs. Miller, played by Julie Christie, as the sharpest businesswoman in any Western ever made. What Altman destroyed here was the myth of the rugged individual conquering the West, replacing it with corporate thugs, exploitation, and the inevitable crushing of small dreams by bigger money. Leonard Cohen's haunting soundtrack plays over scenes of prostitution and opium dens, creating a narcotic atmosphere where everyone is trapped in cycles they can't escape. Critics were split down the middle, with Pauline Kael praising its revisionist genius, while others complained it was too slow, too depressing, too real. The film barely broke even, and Altman's reputation took another hit in a decade where studios wanted him to play by their rules. But cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond shot it with flashing techniques and fog filters that made every frame look like a faded photograph, as if we're watching ghosts of people who never had a chance. The final shootout happens during a church fire that nobody cares about because making money matters more than salvation, and McCabe dies in a snowdrift while the town ignores him completely. Beatty mumbles his way through dialogue like a man who knows he's already lost, and Christie plays addiction and intelligence with equal weight. This isn't a Western about heroes, it's about capitalism eating the frontier alive and leaving corpses nobody will remember. Modern critics now rank it among the greatest Westerns ever made, proving audiences and studios can be completely wrong about a film's value. Number 5. The Last of Sheila, 1973. Stephen Sondheim and Anthony Perkins wrote this labyrinthine murder mystery game that doubles as Hollywood satire, and it bombed so completely that most people don't even know it exists. James Coburn plays a movie producer who invites 6 Hollywood players to his yacht 1 year after his wife Sheila died in a hit-and-run, forcing them to play a cruel game where everyone's secrets get exposed. What makes this film remarkable is how it treats the mystery like an actual puzzle box, with clues hidden in dialogue, props, and character behavior that rewards obsessive viewers who watch it multiple times. Sondheim and Perkins were famous for hosting elaborate murder mystery parties in real life, and they poured that game master energy into a script that's genuinely clever rather than pretending to be. Herbert Ross directed with a soap opera glossiness that hides the venom underneath, making the betrayals and revelations land like slaps. Critics praise the performances, especially Richard Benjamin and James Mason trading barbs like assassins, but audiences had no patience for a whodunit that required actual attention. The film made almost nothing at the box office and vanished so completely that even film noir fans haven't heard of it. Raquel Welch plays against type as a sharp-tongued actress. Deanne Cannon brings desperation to a fading starlet, and everyone is morally compromised in ways that feel true to Hollywood's ecosystem. The final revelation about who killed Sheila and why twists the knife by making everyone complicit in the machinery of fame and silence. This is what Knives Out wishes it could be, a murder mystery where the game itself reflects the corrupt system all the players serve. Sondheim later said he was prouder of this script than some of his musicals because it was pure clockwork storytelling. Criterion should release this immediately so a new generation can discover what real puzzle box cinema looks like. Number 4. 3 Women, 1977. Robert Altman dreamed this entire movie, literally woke up with the full story in his head, and somehow convinced studios to fund his surreal nightmare about identity theft and female friendship gone wrong. Sissy Spacek plays Pinky, a childlike spa worker who becomes obsessed with her roommate Millie, played by Shelley Duvall as the most tragically deluded character in 70s cinema. What happens next is impossible to describe without ruining the dreamlike logic. Identities blur and merge, reality fractures, and by the end, you're not sure who is who or if any of it actually happened. Altman shot it in Palm Springs using non-actors and improvisation, creating an atmosphere of alienation where every conversation feels slightly off, like everyone is speaking different languages. Critics were baffled, with some calling it a masterpiece of psychological horror and others dismissing it as pretentious nonsense without a plot. The film was a commercial disaster. Audiences expecting another MASH or Nashville walked out confused and angry. But what Altman captured was something primal about female identity, motherhood, and the desperate need for connection that curdles into possession. The murals painted by Bodie Wind, who plays the third woman, are nightmarish visions of pregnant figures and violence that appear throughout the film like prophetic warnings. Spacek and Duvall give career-best performances, especially Duvall, whose endless monologues about dinner parties nobody attends become heartbreaking portraits of loneliness. The ending suggests a complete transformation or collapse into something new, a makeshift family built from stolen identities and unspoken trauma. Altman never explained what it all meant. insisting the dream logic was the point, and that ambiguity makes it richer and more disturbing with every viewing. This is art house horror at its most uncompromising, refusing to comfort or clarify. Number 3. Sorcerer, 1977. William Friedkin followed up The Exorcist with this remake of The Wages of Fear, a grueling thriller about 4 desperate men transporting unstable dynamite through South American jungle hell, and it became one of cinema's most legendary commercial disasters. The film cost over $20 million and was released the same month as Star Wars, guaranteeing complete annihilation at the box office. Friedkin spent months shooting in the Dominican Republic under nightmarish conditions, with cast and crew getting sick, equipment breaking, and budgets exploding while Paramount executives panicked. Roy Scheider leads the cast as Jackie Scanlon, a New Jersey criminal fleeing mob justice, and his journey across rope bridges and mountain roads in a truck filled with sweating dynamite creates sustained tension that most modern action films can't touch. Critics were mixed to negative, complaining the first hour was too slow and the ending was too bleak, because apparently watching desperate men risk death for escape money wasn't uplifting enough. The film bombed so catastrophically that Friedkin's career never fully recovered, and for decades it was impossible to see because of rights issues and studio neglect. But modern reassessment has crowned it a masterpiece of physical filmmaking, with every explosion and truck crossing feeling terrifyingly real because Friedkin refused to use miniatures or rear projection. The rope bridge sequence alone took weeks to film and remains one of the most white-knuckle moments in thriller history. Tangerine Dream's electronic score adds layers of existential dread, turning the jungle into a living nightmare that wants these men dead. The title refers to one of the trucks, not magic, but the film is filled with supernatural dread anyway, as if God himself is engineering their punishment. Friedkin restored it years later, finally giving audiences the chance to see what he actually intended, and the reputation turnaround has been complete. This is what happens when a director makes art instead of entertainment and pays the price for decades. Number 2. The Duellists, 1977. Ridley Scott's directorial debut is a period piece about 2 Napoleonic officers who fight duels across 15 years for reasons neither can remember, and it's the most visually stunning film almost nobody has seen. Keith Carradine plays de Hubert, the reluctant participant, while Harvey Keitel brings unhinged intensity to Farad, the obsessed aggressor who turns a minor insult into a lifelong vendetta. Scott shot it like a series of moving paintings, using natural light and landscapes that look torn from history books, creating compositions so beautiful they distract from the mounting absurdity of the central conflict. The film cost less than $1 million, mostly funded by British television, and Scott used every penny for costumes and locations rather than star power. Critics at Cannes loved it, awarding Scott the Best Debut Film Prize, but commercial distribution was minimal and audiences never showed up. What makes this a hidden gem is how Scott turns the duel into metaphor for masculinity itself, 2 men trapped in cycles of violence and honor that serve no purpose except their own egos. Each duel is filmed differently, from chaotic saber clashes in barns to formal pistol exchanges in forests, showing how war and ritual blend into meaningless repetition. The ending delivers a moment of grace that neither character expected, a choice to stop that feels more radical than any death could. Conrad's short story provided the skeleton, but Scott added layers of class resentment and military absurdity that make the conflict feel both specific and universal. This is the film that proved Scott could direct, leading directly to Alien and Blade Runner, yet it remains forgotten even by his fans. The cinematography by Frank Tidy deserves worship. Every frame could hang in a museum. If you want to see how a director announces genius in a debut, this is the blueprint most filmmakers never achieve. Number 1. The Holy Mountain, 1973. Alejandro Jodorowsky made this psychedelic religious nightmare with money from John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and it became the most controversial banned film of the decade for reasons that become obvious within the first 10 minutes. The film follows a thief who looks like Jesus through a surreal journey to meet alchemists representing planets in the solar system, building toward an assault on the holy mountain where immortal gods live. What unfolds is 2 hours of sacred imagery twisted into grotesque satire, with scenes of mass crucifixions of toads, simulated divine rituals involving bodily fluids, and political allegories so aggressive they make A Clockwork Orange look subtle. Jodorowsky used real animal remains and created chaos on set, reportedly giving the cast powerful substances to achieve authentic, transcendent states. The film was immediately banned in multiple countries and barely screened in the United States, with theater owners refusing to touch something so blasphemous and transgressive. Critics who saw it were split between worship and disgust, with some calling it visionary genius and others labeling it unwatchable exploitation disguised as art. Jodorowsky himself later regretted some choices, admitting he was young and reckless. But the film's power comes from that exact fearlessness. The final meta-twist breaks the fourth wall in a way that recontextualizes everything, suggesting all religion and storytelling is performance and illusion. For decades it was nearly impossible to see, with bootleg VHS copies trading among cult film collectors like contraband. When it finally got proper restoration and release, new audiences discovered why it terrified distributors and inspired everyone from Kanye West to David Lynch. The production design alone represents thousands of hours of handmade surrealism, creating worlds that feel like fever dreams translated to film. This isn't just a hidden gem, it's the nuclear bomb of 70s cinema that still detonates minds 50 years later. These 10 films prove the 70s produced far more than the classics everyone pretends to worship. They were too weird, too angry, too honest for mainstream success, and that's exactly why they matter more now than ever. Drop a comment telling me which one you're watching first, or better yet, which masterpiece I criminally left off this list. Here's the real question though. If these brilliant films failed because audiences weren't ready, what modern masterpieces are we ignoring right now that will be considered genius in 50 years? Defend your answer, or admit you have no idea what greatness looks like until someone tells you.